Okay, week 4 of our coronavirus update. So this week I'm going to keep it very short on sort of the coronavirus side of it and talk more about some markets and just what I'm thinking there and how I am, I suppose, preparing us to go to the next stage on things. So the first thing is, let's just talk about Australia. Australia seem like they're handling it quite well. So if we go and zoom right out and look at it from a high level, it appears as though despite, what decisions might have been made, it to this point seems to be the cases are under control. The hospitals are a long way from being able to run. We do have good preparations in place. So we can cope with if we have, some clusters or outbreaks or some of those sorts of things. Now, of course, we don't want to get that stuff, but it feels like, maybe we are the lucky country. Famous last words, I know, but it feels like it relatively is under control in Australia at the moment. If that trend continues, then there will be increasing sort of information or I suppose thought changes from the public that they want to start coming out of this sooner. And so I think that we're going to get some little blips when that happens. Who knows? There's been a bit of modelling going around, but it's natural that that's going to happen. There are other countries that have set the gold standard for how that is working and how you can come out the other side. Hong Kong is doing it at the moment. People cast stones at China and Hong Kong, but another country I think we could take some lessons from is Taiwan. Taiwan's very close to China. They also have had this and been dealing with it for quite some time, and they've, to a relative sense, got their economy going and the population moving again. And so we can take some lessons through, temperature measurements from there on attendance of schools, everybody wearing a mask, some of these sorts of things. And so people are going to go, well, Australians don't really have an appetite for that. We don't really like to be told what to do. So I would argue, and this is kind of maybe a little bit optimistic, but I feel like Australians will do some of those things and are relatively compliant if you help them understand why they need to do it. And I think, social distancing to an extent or to a very good extent has been successful. And I think most people are trying very hard. And it appears like that to me. So we're not perfect, but, we have probably got sort of 90% compliance or something like that. And so, if it was, okay, well, we can stay socially distancing and the economy is going to keep being under pressure, or we can adapt these additional measures and we can start getting people back to school and opening up some workplaces, then I know what I would rather do. And I think if that is sold to the people, then that could be accepted. That's just a little bit there. I think the data, rather than really delving into the data at the moment, I think a lot is developing. There's a lot of talk in the media. They're just focusing on the USA, Spain and Italy, really, where, the death rates are harrowing, or what's happening and how much it's unfolding. There's less talk about other places that are handling it well, like Taiwan, South Korea, Iceland, Germany, maybe Australia. There's going to be a lot of information coming out in the next week. There's been certainly people are just casting a lot of stones at America saying they're absolutely screwed. I think, if we got in and looked at the data, certainly there are some big issues in different pockets of that country. But there's other pockets of the country where things aren't ravagingly out of control. Also, they've got their testing up to sort of 5,000 per mil of population. And you can see Italy and Germany are at 10,000. Australia, somewhere down here, I saw we're at 11,000. To me, it's 11,000 per mil population. So to me, as the testing ramps up, you're going to get a better and better, clearer picture of that. And so that I think will happen in the USA as well. And so we'll see what unfolds there. So that's sort of the coronavirus. I'm just going to kind of park it for a week or so because I feel like there's going to be a lot of development there in the next little while. But what can we, and I'm an advisor, I'm not a public health official. And so more to me, you're going to want to know some context about where markets are going. So here, me saying I'm parking it feels like there's too much uncertainty to get a really good feel about where things are going. And I think that's right, and we should keep that in mind. So I'm going to start with the big picture first, and then I'm going to take you back to some specifics at the moment. So 2 additional things here. So bull markets versus bear markets. This just gives you some context going back to the 1920s, and it goes back actually further than that. But, I'll sort of go from 1950. If you look at the markets where the years where the share market does well, they're in red. So that's sort of bull market years, 160% that, and then -20 in that bear market, 170% in that bull market, -20. So you've got -30. That's probably the biggest one we have had, -67 over a period of time. And then you can see, it does set up for 1,700% over the next period of time. That is truly an amazing sort of return. And we've had some very solid years through there, intermittent with some bear markets. But what do we need to think about? The average bear market is 1.3 years. Okay, so this was the quickest bear market we've had to date, and I don't feel like it's over yet. But you can see, if you can ride out these, if you can get set and get some of these red, it makes a huge difference to your overall portfolio. If we said we got in 20% too early down here, which maybe that's now, nobody knows, but you just take 20% off that result there. So rather than 183%, it's going to be 136 off that. It's going to be sort of 140% return. So that's sort of some context on some bigger picture. What do I think we need to keep in mind now? 2 really big things. So I started this with it being a health crisis, and it was going to be solvable from an economic sense. That I was naive, okay? So very quickly it's developed into an economic crisis. This is the GFC. In the depths of the GFC, when it was all said and done, 8 million people had lost their jobs and 6 million people had lost their homes, and that was just in America. And that was after sort of over an 18-month period. So where are we now? Depending on what you read, 10 to 12 million people have lost their jobs in the last 2 weeks. So it was 8 at the depths of the GFC. We're only a couple of weeks into this for America with their lockdowns, maybe a little longer, 3 weeks into their lockdowns, depending on where you're thinking about. But that we've already surpassed that number, and it's looking like it's going to get worse. And so, that needs to be taken into account. So the second thing that I wanted to kind of talk about with markets is this is a little bit of a busy chart, but Totus Capital have put this together, and I'm just going to try and pick out one example here. So let's pick out this example here, which is the global financial crisis. And so in the global financial crisis, the total days from the high to low were 356, or about 1 year. The total decline was -57%. So that was in the depths of the GFC, so the worst from the high to the low. And this is what I want us to think about. The amount of times that we've got a rally of greater than 10% over a market coming down. It's in that bear market. So the GFC is this dark blue line. And so I'll try and pick out a couple here. There seems to be, so they're saying 4, and the average rally was 17%. So 1 there, 1 there, probably 1 there, and maybe there was 1 in there. But it doesn't matter really where they were, and it's more of a thought process that you can get these rallies, like we've had one just here, but the market trend definitely could be on the way down still. And so if you go back and look over essentially the major crashes that we've had in the last period of time, we've got 87.com now, GFC. This is kind of, we've had consistently, 87 was probably the kindest, because it was the least amount of days, and then started recovering, and it recovered actually quite well. But, even then, they still had 13% rallies before it started going up from the bottom, okay? .com, we had 4, and the average was 18%. And then the average of these 3 put together is 3 with an average of 16%. Let's probably take into account this one here. But that's, I suppose, a concept that I'm trying to get. We're going to get these blips through time, And I don't feel like it means we've missed the market. I definitely could be wrong, but the guys that I feel are the smarter guys that have been around for a while are preaching, just be very patient at the moment. There's too much uncertainty. And so how to position through patience is slowly eke some money in, to slowly put some in, and then if it comes off dramatically further, then you can reassess that slowness and put more in from those points of time. The further it comes down, the much more likely to get, it's not going to go to zero. You're going to get a quantum result out the other side. So it's going to balloon a lot more out of it. So summary, the coronavirus is a bit of feeling on Australia, coming out the other side. There are some information around the world. Some other interesting stuff, sort of like Sweden, how they're approaching it, whether they end up with their approach. They're doing a little bit of herd immunity, so that might give us a bit of a feel if it gets out of control later with some recoveries and that sort of stuff. But we'll see if they end up making it through political pressure. But some markets and context, how many jobs are lost, and preaching patience. And so that's pretty much the roundup for this week.